There's just a few more things we want to cover to help you complete project 1. So I'm going to bounce back over to our list and scroll down to miscellaneous. So there is a much larger list of these text formatting tags. We're not going to cover a lot of them though, because once we learn CSS, we don't need most of them. So I'm only going to cover the ones that we'll need in order to complete project 1. And there's a few more you might want to use. So first is block quote. Block quote is going to indent content from the left. Let's go ahead and try it. All right, so let's say this summary here, this paragraph, I want it indented from the side. If we look at our example so far, everything is pressed up against that left side of our screen. That's because we don't have a means of adding space yet other than the browser defaults. Block quote is something that we can use to kind of structure our resume, even though later you would want to use CSS instead. So keep that in mind. Some of these things I'm going to show you now under miscellaneous would not be used once you know CSS. All right, but if I was going to do that for my resume, I have to think about, what do I want to indent? Do I want to indent just the paragraph? Do I want to indent that whole article? Do I want to indent that whole section? If I wanted to indent the whole section, for example, summary, the whole thing I want indented over from the name, I then would need to put the block quote before section. So I would open block quote before section. That gave me the closing block quote. So I need to make sure I take that closing block quote. I've highlighted it. I hit Command X to get rid of it, but copy it. I then go down and find section and make sure to close block quote after section closes. Section needs to be nested inside of block quote for this to work. Same as always. They need to be nested nicely inside of each other. I go ahead and save that and refresh my preview. And I can see here my summary is now indented over from the left. There's another way that I can kind of manipulate some of this spacing. So next in our list, we have center. This is going to allow us to center a line of text or a whole element. Let's take a look at that. So back over in our example, let's say my heading 1 in my header, I want that to be centered. So again, think about it. What do I want to center? I'm not trying to center the entire header. I'm trying to center the heading 1 inside the header. That means I want to go in between header and heading 1. Then open center. Again, that gave me the closing center, so I'm going to highlight it, Command X to get rid of it, but also copy it. Then I need to see here where I need to close it. So it needs to be nested properly. I have my header, then center opens, then heading 1. Heading 1 closes. I need that center to close in between heading 1 and closing heading 1 and closing header. As soon as I put it in the right place, my text is no longer red. I've coded correctly. I'm going to go ahead and save that, go back to my preview and refresh. John Doe is now centered. All right, let's jump back over to our list and see a couple other things. So scrolling down, we have break, this BR in the brackets, or HR in the brackets. These two are what are known as self-closing tags. We'll see a couple of others later, but for now these are the two that you might possibly use. So self-closing tags means you only need an opening tag, not a closing tag. They are self-closing, and that's because you don't add content inside of them. So there's no need for a closing tag because you'll never need to put something in between. They just are what they are. So break is a way for you to control spacing without using CSS. It's a way for you to force a break in a line. So what does that mean? Let's go back to our paragraph here. And first I want to look at the preview. Remember, it's going all the way over to the edge. Maybe I don't want it to. That is a really long line to read. And if you're following kind of standards for document layout, an ideal line of text is around 166 characters, and this is way more than that. So let's say I wanted to break this line here at typesetter. I then would go and find that word in my paragraph. Here's typesetter. And I add that break tag. So open angle bracket, BR, close angle bracket, save, refresh, and I now see I've forced that line to break. So the difference here between break and HR stands for horizontal rule. Horizontal rule is also going to break the line, but it's then going to add a thin visual line. So let's say after John Doe, I want to add a line to separate the header from the main. Over here in my code, I'm going to find my header where it opens and closes, and here's my main. So at the end of the closing header tag, I'm going to go ahead and give myself some space and add in the HR tag. Save it and refresh. And now I have this nice little thin line that's giving me some separation. I could use that anywhere. Maybe I also want to add that between the main and the footer. I find that and closing main tag, hit return, and add in HR. Go ahead and save that and refresh. And even though I don't have content yet, I can see now where there's a line between the main and the footer. Let's go back over, and there's one last thing. This is kind of a weird one. This is what's called a named character entity, and this is a non-breaking space named character entity. It's a mouthful. So in the itinerary, I'm going to have a link to where you can see all the other named character entities, and if you want to use them in your resume, feel free. Such things as copyright. For the most part, any symbol you want to add into your content sometimes can mess up your code because the browser will think you're trying to code. So it confuses it. So any of these symbols, and sometimes even characters, you're going to, instead of just typing that symbol or character, you're going to add in a named character entity in its place. The browser reads that named character entity and inserts the proper content in the viewport. What we're doing here with the non-breaking space is we're using it to manipulate our content. And we're using it in a different way than it's actually intended. It's intended to keep two words together that you don't want to break down from a line. I'll show you that first, then I'll show you how you can use it to help format your resume a little bit better. So back over to our code. So it is originally intended to keep two words together. So let's say I had within a paragraph my name, April Wilkins. And Wilkins came at the end of the viewport, so it was going to drop down to the next line. If I wanted to make sure to keep April and Wilkins together so that they both had to drop down, I could add this non-breaking space named character entity in between those two words, and it would keep them together. Instead, we're going to use it to add more spaces where we want them. Because remember, code only recognizes one space. But in a resume, for example, maybe I have a job title and then a date. And maybe I want the dates to all line up between my jobs. If I just, in my code, hit space, 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 in the viewport, I'm not going to see anything. But instead, I can add this named character entity, the non-breaking space, over and over and over and over for each space that I want. So let's look at this first. We have the ampersand. All these named character entities, they're always going to begin with an ampersand and end with a semicolon. Then the name of the named character entities in between. So here we have NBSP for non-breaking space. So we're going to go ahead and add that in where we want extra space. Let's say I want space between the marker in my lists and the list items. So here, before Photoshop, I'm going to place my cursor and I'm going to add in that non-breaking space named character entity. So I'm going to add in the ampersand, NBSP, semicolon. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's just do one for now. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And notice it added one little space there. In that list, notice between Photoshop and InDesign, there's that one little space. So let's say I wanted even more than that. I need that named character entity for every single space that I want. So if I wanted 5 spaces, I'd go ahead and copy it and paste it 4 more times. I'll go ahead and save that, come over here and refresh. I now have that extra space that I wanted. Just to take another look at this example, that's what's going on here. Notice all those non-breaking space named character entities. If we take a look at this example, I double click to get that preview. And you can see here how they've used it to force certain things over. So for example, here are the dates using that non-breaking space. So that covers everything that we need to learn for Project 1. I'm going to also add this example code into the itinerary so that you can look and see how you could possibly do things. Keep in mind though, I expect yours to be very different from this one. I just want to give you an example, but you should be trying to create your own resume. So use everything that you've learned in these last videos to complete Project 1.